Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again. The progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again, we're live here during the 56th anniversary of celebration of Kwanzaa. Today is day 3 of Kwanzaa, if you are unaware. And today's principle is Ujima. So I'm going to greet you all in the Kwanzaa greeting of Habarigani. And of course, the response would be Ujima, collective work and responsibility. So I think we're going to have a great conversation regarding this third principle, collective work and responsibility, what it means. I have a rather funny story regarding my children and how they applied the principle of collective work and responsibility. I'm going to make sure I write that down so I can share that. And how they applied it when I was teaching them about it when they were younger. So we will bring that up. But first and foremost, as you all know, have to go over the ground rules. Then we'll get into the conversation. The link is in the chat. Shout out to Sister Empress Love. Appreciate you, Sister. Ujima is the word of the day. But as you all know, here at Lumumba Speaks, our mission, we are a Black empowerment initiative in which we believe we could gain competitive advantage as African people, as Black people throughout the world by always betting on Black. Our mission, when we have these robust, intellectually stimulating conversations, is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to simply challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has been previously accepted as fact. As you all know, we do welcome diversity of thought, so you don't have to celebrate Kwanzaa to be part of this conversation. You do not have to be a Pan-Africanist to be part of this conversation. You don't have to be a Black nationalist to be part of this conversation. You don't have to be someone who has what Jabril would call a militant integrationist, someone who believes in a Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion. You could be someone who is a ne'er-do-weller. You could be a miscreant. You could be someone who is extremely apolitical, but this is still a space where you could come and be part of the conversation. Number 2, we do not allow racial epithets of any kind to be used regarding African people. I believe it is unbecoming. We believe in Black empowerment. We know when we talk about the 3 N's of Black power, they are self-respect, self-defense, and to be self-determining. And so first and foremost, we want to respect ourselves as African people by not using racial epithets to describe our people. I think number 2, and even more important, one of the lessons I believe from one of the elders in Chicago, he said there's a reason why, feces goes down the septic tank, right? Goes down the toilet into a septic tank. He says you can't sanitize it. So we don't want to regurgitate that type of language or that type of energy when we are speaking with each other. Then number 3, of course, as you all know, facts over feelings, facts over feelings. We can argue, we can attack a person's argument, but we don't want to attack an actual person. I believe that behavior, of course, is unbecoming. And then last but not least, you cannot make any statements that are fundamentally false. We don't allow that here at Lumumba Speaks. Many people will take umbrage with that, but this is my platform, and I'm responsible for the information that is disseminated on my channel. So with that being said, I don't allow anyone to make a fundamentally false statement. Now, I always give an example of a fundamentally false statement when we talk about the LeBron James, Michael Jordan debate. For example, one could believe that LeBron James is the better basketball player. However, if one was to state that Michael Jordan isn't better than LeBron James because he only won 2 championships, that would be an example of a fundamentally false statement. As we all know, Michael Jordan won 6 championships and he went 6-0 in the NBA Finals. But that's a conversation for another day. So, of course, as you all know, we are practicing, celebrating Ujima, the third principle of Kwanzaa, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, which teaches us to build and maintain our own communities and to make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. This principle also teaches us that it supports the fundamental assumption, and I want to make this very clear, that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny, i.e. a responsibility. So I'm going to say that one more time. The principle of Ujima, collective work and responsibility, supports the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny, i.e. a responsibility. Collective work, meaning that we are collectively responsible for our failures and our successes, and that we should all encourage rigorous self-criticism and correction. If there are a time or situation in which we are at odds, we should actually look to have a meaningful and a constructive resolution of differences, as we all know, in a nonviolent manner. I've always made the statement or adage that we need to take the concept of Dr. King of nonviolence and apply that to each other rather than those who tend to do us harm social, politically, and of course, economically. Um, so I think that's something that we truly need to understand. But the question that we're going to be asking today is we're going to want you all to share some stories of practicing Ujima throughout the year. If you could share a time in which you've practiced throughout this year the concept and idea of collective work and responsibility. And then, of course, how do we practice Ujima going into the new year? So what ways are we going to be looking to practice collective work and responsibility in 2023? And the link is in the description. I'll also put the link in the chat. And the story I was going to tell about my children was, so I think my son was about 5, 6. My daughter was 3. And I was telling them about the principle of Ujima. We were going through the 7 principles, even taught them about a song so they could remember the principles. And my son literally said, oh, the Ujima is great because we could work together to beat you up. This was his literal interpretation of how he could practice Ujima right there on the fly. Like, we could practice Ujima by beating you up, Dad. Right? So I thought that was rather comical. Kind of brought some levity to a situation that was rather important. But also it shows that children are able to understand these principles and apply them in terms of how they view the world, even as a child. So I think that was a great example. So as I said before, the link is in the description. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and we're going to get the conversation started as we are celebrating the 56th year. This is 56th year Kwanzaa has been celebrated. As many of you may be aware, Kwanzaa is celebrated by African people on every continent except Antarctica, right? So African people on the continent, in Europe, in Asia, Australia, South America, and of course, North America, all practice Kwanzaa. There's a great documentary on it that's narrated by Maya Angelou entitled Black Candle. I believe that the documentary was directed by Molefe K. Asante Jr. If you are unaware of who Molefe K. Asante Jr. is, he is the son of Molefe K. Asante Sr., who, of course, is the chairperson of the Department of African Studies at Temple University. And, of course, Molefe K. Asante Sr. Is the individual who actually wrote the book and came up with the term, a concept, and idea of Afrocentricity. I think I actually have the book here rather quickly. Yep, right here. So Afrocentricity, this is the book written by Molefe K. Asante Sr. Of course, and his son actually directed the documentary Black Candle that, of course, is narrated by Maya Angelou that talks about Kwanzaa, goes all around the world showing African people practicing Kwanzaa on every continent, of course, except Antarctica. But today we're going to be discussing the third principle of Kwanzaa because it is the third day of Kwanzaa, and that is Ujima, collective work and responsibility. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. I want some brothers and sisters to tap in and share their stories about how they've practiced collective work and responsibility throughout the year. Then, of course, what can we do as an African people to practice collective work and responsibility better going into 2023? We know that as Paul Robeson taught us, the battlefield or the battlefront is everywhere. There is no show to the rear. So I think we should always be looking to work together in the way that we can to ensure that we are empowering each other due to the fact that we live in a world that is vehemently anti-Black, anti-African. So with that being said, we're looking to have a robust conversation regarding practicing Ujima, collective work and responsibility. And I would just give a perspective in terms of how I practice Ujima. One thing I look to do is actually be there for my brothers and sisters. So if I get a call, brothers or sisters, I need to talk to you, I have a situation, hey, I provide an ear, right? I think oftentimes it's best to receive information or advice from a person who isn't directly attached to a situation. They're able to be reasonable, logical. Also, of course, with me being a doctoral student, oftentimes I have brothers and sisters who come to me for advice in terms of writing a paper or doing research or presenting at a conference or even just professional development. And of course, I'm always willing to share the knowledge that I've received. And so, part of being practicing that adage of the proverb of reach one, teach one. And so any way that I'm able to help I've done that. So even if it goes to, hey, can you help me move, to, of course, hey, I have a business idea. Can you assist me in doing so? So anytime I'm able to lend my services in any way, shape, or form to help African people um, store themselves to their traditional greatness, I'm always willing to do so, even if that means I'm sometimes having some late night phone conversations. So, with that being said, as I stated before, even with my children at the tender ages of 5 and 3, they were able to understand the concept of Ujima, working together to beat daddy up, right? um, and it's rather comical. If you all were there, it probably would have been America's funniest home video. So, but for me, that was something that I was able to do and share with my children, and they were able to understand the importance of working together. So, we want to, of course, open that up to throughout the community where we're working together. And this is something I think that needs to be said. But oftentimes we see other communities practicing the very principles of Kwanzaa that many people tend to eschew for various reasons. And so I think we're doing ourselves a disservice, as Dr. Claude Anderson mentions, and even Dr. Amos Wilson mentions, is that racism is a team sport. Being ethnocentric is a team sport. It's not that concept idea of being vulgarly individualistic that will get us nowhere. So I think it's very important that we understand that if we're going to ever, become great as a people, it's going to come through working together. So, and with that being said, as I said before, the link is in the chat. As you all know, you do not have to cam up. Keyword is you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation. And of course, you could use a pseudonym if you like, but we're wanting to have a robust conversation regarding the third principle of Kwanzaa, and that is, of course, Ujima, collective work and responsibility to build and create our own communities and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. And as we know, the principle Ujima supports the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny. It is a responsibility. So we believe it's a responsibility to be African. And meaning, what that means is we have to understand, take on that responsibility, and that is to what? Uphold the tradition of what it means to be African. And that is, of course, in part being the fathers and mothers of humanity and human civilization, but also understanding that there's a legacy that's been left behind by our ancestors, and we need to further that legacy as well. Collective responsibility also means that we are collectively responsible for our failures and our successes, while encouraging vigorous self-criticism and correction. We know that oftentimes in our community, whenever there's a focus on the internal issues in our community, meaning the racially disempowering, self-destructive, and self-defeating manners in which many of us live our daily lives, that tends to be what shunned and people focus on or argue, hey, you're maybe trying to ingratiate yourself with the white power structure, so on and so forth. And we know there are individuals that do that, particularly Black Republicans. But this is a real issue. We have to be focused on self-correction, because the work that we have to do has to come from within. It's not going to come from without. It's not going to come from like manna come down from heaven and square us away. So we definitely need to understand the importance of self-correction. So with that being said, Sister Empress, I think you're still tapped in. We'd love for you to tap in and share your perspective. And you said you was going to cam up. You said you was going to cam up eventually and share your perspective on Ujima. How have you practiced Ujima throughout the year? And what ways are you looking to move forward and practice Ujima in a newer manner, a nuanced manner, in a more provocative manner going into 2023? So the link is in the chat, brothers and sisters. The link is in the chat, as well as in the description. We can even open up the conversation, have a conversation about Kwanzaa. What are your thoughts about Kwanzaa? When did you start to celebrate? Why do you celebrate? If you don't celebrate, you can maybe share your perspective on why you're not. I think this is a place where we can have a productive conversation, rooted, of course, in facts, not feelings, and rooted in, of course, a conversation that is absent of fundamentally false statements. So, as I stated before, you're watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube, a Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Make sure the link is in the chat. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button, notification bell, and share. We want to share as well. I think we could have a great conversation this evening regarding Kwanzaa in 2022. This is the 56th year that Kwanzaa has been celebrated. And we're talking about practicing Ujima, collective work and responsibility. And I think it's something to mention that this is the 56th year Kwanzaa has been celebrated. We know that there are a number of individuals who take issue with Kwanzaa, take umbrage with Kwanzaa for a litany of reasons, a myriad of reasons. But we've shown the staying power of Kwanzaa. And I think one of the reasons I think we should really, as African people, take pride in that is that Kwanzaa is not a commercial holiday, right? We know oftentimes, unfortunately, in our community, if there's a commercial aspect to something, it gains popularity and credence. But Kwanzaa is a holiday that is truly meaningful, can be impactful. I believe that Kwanzaa helps us go from being victims to victors, right? And I think that when we talk about some of our great ancestors, when we talk about the Ray Nobles, if we talk about the Amir Cabrals, and so on and so forth, who, of course, fought against white hegemony at home and abroad, what we find is that there was a belief in not just being a victim of white hegemony, but being victorious over it. And I think the principles of Kwanzaa can help us accomplish that. So, as I stated before, the link is in the chat, and we can open up the conversation to talk more so not only just about the principle of Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to build and maintain our own communities and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together, but also about Kwanzaa and as a whole. Shout out to BMO. Okay, the thumbs up. Appreciate you. Hope you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Once again, the link is in the chat. You don't have to come up to be part of the conversation. And we could talk about Kwanzaa. Do you think that Kwanzaa is a positive for the Black community? Do you think it's a negative, right? What issues do you have with Kwanzaa if you don't celebrate Kwanzaa? And of course, maybe we can dispel some of the misinformation around Kwanzaa that tends to take place. So as I stated before, the link is in the chat. I definitely want to have a robust conversation regarding Ujima, particularly the concept and the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, it is a destiny, it is a responsibility. I would love to hear what everyone has to say about that. So I'm gonna put that in the chat, and want to get some people's thoughts on that concept and idea that the principle of Ujima supports the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny. Definitely want to hear what people have to say. But also a destiny, i.e. a responsibility. So with that being said, definitely tap in, brothers and sisters. I know it was a late night. Many of you may be at a Kwanzaa celebration right now. And if you are, more power to you, as well as you should. But if you're not, definitely tap in, and we want to have a great conversation regarding the principle of Ujima, collective work, and responsibility. As I said before, this is the 56th year that Kwanzaa has been celebrated, not only in America, not only in North America, but also in South America, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, the African continent, and of course in Asia. I recall one of my elders, he's retired, he's from Liberia, and he was he actually posted some photos on Facebook of him at a Kwanzaa celebration on the continent. So we know that Kwanzaa is an African-inspired religion created here in the New World, as to say the Western world, but it is a Pan-African holiday as much as it is a African-American holiday. So with that being said, the link is in the chat. Definitely want to have a great conversation regarding the principle of Ujima, collective work, and responsibility, which teaches us to make our brothers, to build and maintain our own communities. I think that's a huge issue. It's one thing to build, it's one thing to create an initiative, but can you maintain it over time? Can you be consistent? Does that commitment wane over time? And unfortunately, oftentimes that's the case. We hope that isn't the case now, going into 2023. But also not only maintain our communities and to make our brothers, sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. So I'm going to have a great conversation regarding the third principle of Kwanzaa, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. What are your thoughts on that? Particularly the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny, i.e. a responsibility. Definitely want some brothers and sisters to tap in and get their perspective on that very strong statement made by Dr. Karinga. As I said it before, I think I put up before, I mentioned that if you haven't, you can get it from the horse's mouth. This is the book here, Kwanzaa, A Celebration of Family, Community, and Culture, written by, of course, the founder, Dr. Malana Karinga. And so definitely we want you all to share your perspective on the principle of Ujima, how you've practiced it, and then, of course, what are your thoughts moving forward in 2023 regarding practicing Ujima? Right? What do you look to do to practice this principle moving forward? So the link is in the chat. Definitely hope the brothers and sisters come out and be part of a great conversation regarding practicing Ujima, collective work and responsibility. As you all know, today is the third day of Kwanzaa, the third day of Kwanzaa, and we are seeking to have a conversation regarding third principle, which is Ujima, collective work and responsibility. I also would like to know how long you all have been celebrating Kwanzaa, and if any of you do celebrate Kwanzaa, how long have you been celebrating? So those are the questions for this evening I'm posing. Hope that we can get some brothers and sisters to tap in and be part of the conversation, and definitely have a robust, intellectually stimulating conversation regarding not only Kwanzaa, but more importantly, the third principle of Kwanzaa, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. And as I stated before, as I always share, you do not have to come up to be part of the conversation. You do not have to come up to be part of the conversation. You do not have to use your actual name. You could use a pseudonym if you would like to be part of the conversation. I understand many people want to maintain anonymity. Many people tend to have a alter ego on social media than who they are in their actual lives, but maybe for numerous purposes, such as work issues, so on and so forth. So that's definitely understandable. But I said before, the link is in the chat. The link is also in the description. Please share your perspective, your concepts, your concerns, your ideas, and of course, your history of practicing and celebrating Ujima, and then of course, what you plan to do moving forward in 2023. So I shared my perspective. I even shared a rather, I believe, comical story about my children, and of course, the principle of Ujima. And when I shared with them what it was, they said, "Okay, yeah, we could practice this to beat you up," right? So they understood the concept of teamwork makes the dream work, and that we know that this is a fundamentally African principle that predates all of us, of course. And we know Kwanzaa is a celebration that draws on ancient as well as classical African cultural traditions and celebrations. So, and then of course, last but not least, the question that I'm asking for brothers and sisters watching, and if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button, thumbs up, is this statement here: Ujima supports the fundamental assumption that being African is not just an identity, but also a destiny, i.e. a responsibility. Definitely want to get you all's thoughts on that rather provocative statement. So if you could tap in, be part of the conversation, share your thoughts in the chat, that'd be greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. As you know, you're watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube. We're celebrating Kwanzaa 2022. Today is day 3 of Kwanzaa, and we're seeking to have a conversation regarding practicing Ujima, the third principle of Kwanzaa, Ujima, also known as collective work and responsibility. All right. So I don't think we're going to get anyone this evening, so I'm going to log off. Until next time, you all know what to do. Peace.